you wanted the best, you've got the best podcast, the hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. It's Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. There, ladies, things that makes it official. Welcome to the big show. We certainly appreciate having you guys. As always, the Chris Voss Show is a family that loves you but doesn't judge you, at least not as harshly as your mother-in-law, because your mother-in-law didn't like you anyway. She wanted her to marry Bob. But we love you, so that's a beautiful thing. But also, we don't loan you money. Take and refer the family, friends, and relatives to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, youtube.com/Chris Voss, linkedin.com/Chris Voss, and all those crazy places we are on the internets. As always, we have the most amazing authors on the show with us today. We have another one today. Valerie Johns joins us on the show. Her new book has come out August 27th, 2024, upcoming this year. You can get it in pre-order now. It is entitled Ashes in the Milk. I really like that title. That's a really catchy title. She's doing in her latest book, drawing from her personal experience and private expertise, Ashes in the Milk that bridges the gap between self-help, vulnerable narrative, and prose. As she's traveled a path toward wholeness, she discovered proverbial stories that took decades to unfold, all of which was corroborated by her mother. Her work is that of soul retrieval, and some revival probably too, that leads to psychological healing, reclaiming the parts of ourselves that don't have language, but only unnameable pain and free-floating anxiety. Welcome to the show, Valerie. How are you?
I'm well, Chris. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's funny to hear that out loud.
There you go. I mean, people read my bio and I'm like, who are they talking about? What? Is it me? Did I do all that? It hurts. I can't remember. So, Valerie, give us a .com. Where can people find you on the interwebs?
Okay, my website is valeriejohns.com, VALERIEJOHNS.com. Instagram, Valerie Johns LA, as in Los Angeles. Talk is Valerie Johns Ashes. Mm-hmm. And on Facebook, there's what is called a fan page or whatever now is Ashes in the Milk.
There you go. So give us a 30,000 overview. What's inside your new book? Well,
this is the third time I've written this book, and it's the first successful time I've written it. I've been trying to write it for about 40 years. I got in touch with memories from being a 6-week-old baby, which is very unusual. I get it, and there's probably a lot of people out there that say you can't remember. Mm-hmm. But we've really learned that the body remembers.
Oh, yeah.
So when I was about 7 years into becoming a therapist, I was in a hurricane on Kauai, and I had terrible PTSD afterwards. And I went for hypnosis, and the therapist took me into the hurricane. And instead of the hurricane, I was in a baby's body with my father yelling at me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I called my mom and I asked her, is this real? Did that happen? And there was this long silence on the phone, and she said, how could you possibly know that?
Wow. That's pretty amazing.
So it's been an unfolding journey through the rest of her life until she died. I asked her 1,000 questions about my early infancy. Mm-hmm. And during the pandemic, when there was nowhere to go but inside, I signed up for a writer's workshop with a storyteller named Anne Randolph and just started writing off of prompts. And the poems just started coming, the stories started coming. Mm-hmm. And every day that I wrote was like a pearl on a string of pearls. And by the time I was done, I had a book.
There you go. Sometimes it folds a wild way sometimes with these things where, you know, people just start writing and then there it is. And you call it a poetic memoir.
Yes.
Tell us how, you kind of mentioned the poetic, but why do you think it came together in a poem sort of way?
Well, I was trained as a poet by a man named Jack Graves, who does method writing, like method acting, back in my 20s. And then I became the poet in residence at an elementary school in Pacific Palisades. And so I've been a poet long before I became a therapist.
Ah.
And so I've always used my metaphorical skills, if you will, in working with others. And when this story began to unfold, the narrative just came out as poetry. And somebody in my writers group, we would post our daily rites that we wrote. Somebody said, "Have you ever heard of a poetic memoir?" And I said, "No." And he said, "I think you're writing one.
Oh, wow.
Keep going." And so I kept going.
There you go. Keep going. Sometimes that's the best way through, is to just keep going and going and going. And now you've written it, and it's out, or it comes out on August 27th. Tell us a little bit about your upbringing. Were you always writing? When did you finally kind of notice that you had a knack for writing?
Well, in second grade, I wrote a poem, and Mrs. Best put it to music, and the class sang it. And I was hooked. It was like, oh, I'm a writer. I knew I was a writer. And right after I knew I was a writer, I was kind of like at the peak of my career, if you will, at 8 years old. A neighborhood teenager hit me in the face with a croquet mallet.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
that's not cool at all.
Trauma. Big trauma. At a time in life when we didn't know about traumatic brain injury. The Cubans pointed missiles at Washington, D.C. that year. And I couldn't do math anymore.
Oh, wow.
I couldn't focus. And so I got creative in order to get myself straight A's and kind of BS my way into life as a creative person, because I was somehow a little handicapped, a little behind the eight ball, and always felt like everyone else knew something, had been given like a key to like figure out how to be in the world, and nobody gave me a key. It was just, "You're fine, you're great. Thank God you didn't lose your eye."
Wow.
You know, the story, the mythology from when I was a baby was Valerie went over to the bottle without a fuss. And that was their story. I was the miracle child, firstborn. They couldn't wait to have me. And so when I showed up as depressed and anxious, they were just like, "What's wrong with you? We made you a perfect life. Why can't you be happy?" And I just was like this dark, tortured child, writing dark, tortured poetry from third grade on.
Trying to survive. Now, so you think you had traumatic brain injury then, huh?
I'm pretty sure, because I had another one about 5 years ago now. I got thrown off of my horse on trail and knocked out cold.
Yeah. I've had friends that have gotten that. We've had people on the show that have written books about their traumatic brain injuries. One was their daughter, and it's a big deal. It changes people, and, people can have a hard time in public. They can have a hard time functioning.
Yes.
It's a really big deal. And so, it's something that people struggle with.
Yeah.
And it pretty much is for life too. It's something that sticks with you.
I don't know. I kind of feel like after the concussion 5 years ago, I started telling stories at the Moth. I did all of this internal work to write this book.
Yeah.
And I feel like through the dream work that I've done, I studied with a guy named Steve Eisenstadt, who started the Pacifica Graduate Institute in Santa Barbara. And Stephen helped me, along with a cohort of about 70 or 80 people, unlock dreams that told stories about parts of ourselves that we didn't have conscious access to.
Oh, wow.
And so that is what arose through the poetry and into the book, where weaving these dreams that got my baby back, that got my 6-year-old was living inside a tsunami nightmare that I kept having. My 8-year-old was in there, my 19-year-old when I almost died, and I dropped my body at the bottom of the ocean when I was 19 years old, and I retrieved her through doing dream work.
Some of the things about trauma is saving the child that you lost when you were a child. The trauma took away your childhood, sort of thing.
Yes,
I think that's my theory. But you did the Moth thing. We've had the folks from the Moth on for their book, and I think we had 2 or 3 of them on from the Moth, the speaking series. How was that?
it was being one of my comic friends at the Improv used to call it being intimate with terror when you get on stage.
With terror.
You
Sounds
know?
like my first 10 marriages.
Yeah, my first two. But it's like you get up there and the spotlight's on you and you've got 5 minutes to tell a story. And it's a fabulous audience. Those people really want you to do well. And they're up on YouTube. They were a blast to tell. And then bang, the pandemic hit and everything shut down. And so it went into a book. But it's all what I would call moth-worthy stories. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There you go. I think they have another book out. I think we're trying to book them for a second book that they have out, or they were coming on. They might be booked. I have to check, but yeah, they're really good at what they do. And those I'd never heard of the Moth series or anything. I guess they're real popular back east. And so when they came on, I found out, I learned all the data on the stuff, and I was like, wow, this is just freaking amazing. Yes. What you guys are doing here. So good stuff. So now you've written the book, and how do you feel about, finally getting it put on paper?
It's amazing. Mm-hmm. Makes me cry. I retrieved all these parts of myself that intellectually I've understood for years. Now they have internal family systems, parts therapy work, and all these kind of nouveau fashionable therapies out there about trauma retrieval. But I've been digging myself out of hell for almost 40 years through 12-step programs. And in those programs, we tell our stories. Mm-hmm. And I've been telling that story and telling it in this collection of it and making it into art instead of it being just a boo-hoo trauma dump. These bad things happen to me. It's like you can weave it into gold. And so in the alchemical process, where the alchemists believe that you could take ore and through a series of hot kilns, turn it into gold. Mm-hmm. And I feel like my soul retrieval was about taking all of this awful childhood pain, all these different broken parts of me, and weaving them into a whole self that when I read the book now, every time I look at something that I might want to read out loud, it's like a breath comes into me, a breath of life. Like there's no more concussed girl. I had a dream that I was out on the trail in Agoura Hills, walking on the trail, looking for a woman and her horse who were lost. And a cowboy rode up. He looked a lot like Harrison Ford, which was kind of cool, in Yellowstone. And he pulled up on his horse and he said, "Can I help you, miss?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm looking for a woman and her horse." And he pulled me up onto the back of the saddle where I could see. And I could find myself and the part of me that had flown off of PJ and out into the weeds. Oh, wow. And I was able to bring her up into me and integrate her.
Wow.
Yeah, magic.
Yeah, it's interesting how our subconscious, there's sometimes where we suffer trauma, we suffer issues, and our brain kind of masks or hides it or buries it because we can't deal with it at the time. Have you been through trauma therapy? Have you gone done all that? That's probably going to be some interesting work to go through.
Well, as a therapist, you start going through trauma therapy the day you go into your first process class in graduate school. Mm-hmm. I was the only sober person out of maybe 40 students. I was the only identified patient in the room. Everybody else were like the brothers and sisters and mothers of the problem child. I was the problem child. So I've been unearthing this stuff for a long time, but I've done clinical hypnosis with very wonderful teachers, EMDR, experimented with some psychedelic therapies, all different kinds of things, all for the spirit of retrieving that which was held safely in the unconscious, but generates massive anxiety. I mean, think of it, Chris, when we're born, we're the only mammals who can't get up and get the milk.
That's true.
We're lying there, we're helpless, and so everybody else imprints to, oh, I'm a cow, or I'm a horse, or I'm a doll, a whale, I'm something. And they know immediately that they're empowered to do that, and we lay there and hope somebody comes and feeds us.
I'm still laying there waiting for milk. Can somebody give me some milk, damn it?
But in a way, everybody's anxiety stems from that. They call it a basic anxiety. And if we're not if we're not honored for who we are in our anxious selves, we mask that. And we all put on these masks that say, I'm fine, I'm fine. You know, we have a saying in the 12-step programs that fine, can I cuss on here?
Yes,
Oh,
go ahead.
Fine stands for fucked up, insecure, neurotic, and exhausted.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh at that, but that is brilliant. I like that. So we should have named the podcast that. That should be my name badge or something. I don't know. So there you go. I like that. That's very funny. So as you went through this, when did you first get in touch with your 6-year-old self? I think it was.
Oh, that's my favorite. When I was 6, I had a cowgirl outfit with a red skirt and a red vest with white fringe and red cowgirl boots and a 6-shooter. Mm-hmm. And back in those days, there was this man called the Market Man who came into neighborhoods and sold women eggs and milk and stuff, because nobody had 2 cars in those days. It was 1 car, and we went downtown with Dad to the Treasury Department every day, and we were stuck at home. So I went with a nickel, and I bought some gum, and I rolled it into a cigarette, and I went sashaying through the living room of my mother's house and leaned on the door jamb and took a drag off my cigarette and said, "Howdy, partner." She grabbed me by my arm and started spanking me.
Wow.
Spanking. And my mom was not a hitter. She was not a yeller. And she spanked me, and then she turned my little face back toward the living room, and I had tracked dog shit across the base carpeting. So that's gone. I'm not going to remember that. When I was 16, I started having tsunami nightmares.
Oh, really?
So during the writing of this book and in the dream work, I had a tsunami nightmare where a man came standing next to me in Hermosa Beach, where my office was until last month. And it's Samuel Beckett, the playwright, and he's standing beside me, and here comes the wave. And I turn to run, and he says, "Can I help you?" Because there's a wall suddenly behind me, and I'm going to get hit with this wave. And I say no, and I wake up in a panic. Oh, wow. So when we tend the dream, we freeze the action. Mm-hmm. And when Beckett says, "Can I help you?" I said, "Yes, please." And I thought he was going to give me a boost over the wall, right? Because that's what he would do. He'd offered me his hands like a boost. Instead, he turned to the wave like Moses, I'm not kidding, and parted the wave. And out of that wave came a 6-year-old kid sobbing her ass off. Wow. And that was my little tsunami cowgirl.
There you go. There she is.
She was buried in the ocean right next to my 19-year-old self, who I left there when I almost died. Mm-hmm. I dreamed that I left my body at the bottom of the ocean, and I never thought to go back and get it.
I think mine's
until I wrote this book.
There you go. Yeah. And this is part of the poetic things that you find in the book as you write about your life. Can trauma be healed? I think you touched on that. Do you really feel like it could be completely healed if it's given enough focus on and stuff?
Well, there's an old Jungian analyst named James Hillman that was known for being the bad boy of psychology. Mm-hmm. And I'm kind of in his camp, where I think that we sell people the myth of arrival. That we're going to get you somewhere and you're going to be fine. But remember what fine stands for, right? Yep. So it's a process. And I believe that it's a process that we're going to undergo, whether you believe in life after life or not, at least until they put you in the smokestack or in the ground. You're in a process unfolding into wholeness. Mm-hmm. And there's no shortcuts for that. Therapy helps. I've been in therapy on and off with multiple therapists. I've treated well over 200, 300 people in my career. It's been 33 years of seeing patients.
Wow.
Plus teaching. I taught graduate school students for 12 years. I treated 110 people inside one person with multiple personalities. And it's all a process. Even when she came together from 110, she came down to like 3 or 4 people, not into one person.
Wow.
Because we all have parts, like there's a part of me that a part of me doesn't want to go on podcasts. A part of me doesn't want to show my book. A part of me doesn't want to be that vulnerable. And another part of me says, you're grown up now. You can do this.
Yeah, you can.
It's 2024. That's what I tell my child parts when they go, we can't. I say, no, look at me. It's 2024, you guys. Good news. We made it.
Yeah, you made it. You know, the great thing about telling your story is by sharing with other people that might have maybe had a similar journey or gone through similar things, they can sit there and go, oh, wow, I see what's going on, and she has a way to get through this.
Yes.
So I can follow her lead. You know, that's the great thing about sharing stories. You know, I've told one of the stories that's, you know, everyone's heard from my past, where, you know, my dog one time died, had a seizure, and just immediately within 30 minutes was gone. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks. You don't think things are going to move that fast.
Yeah.
And so I downed a pretty good load of vodka and kind of poured out my heart into a Facebook post. And I was like, oh, God, no one's going to care about this. This is just so selfish and me, and blah, 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 blah. And everyone's just be like, oh, drama queen, Chris Voss, what are you doing? And in reality, I posted it and then went to sleep that night. I woke up the morning and it had touched so many people, and it still touches people. People still remember this day. And I had people that said, you know, because of what I wrote, it helped them cathartically realize they had never gotten closure on their dog's death or their parents' death or someone in their family. I mean, it was just amazing how many people it touched. And I was just like, wow, I didn't know that, you know, it seems selfish to share this story, but man, it sure touched a whole lot of people. And so, you know, it's amazing how we can share our stories and help others.
You know, Chris, especially coming from a man, showing grief is sort of against our culture. Mm-hmm. You know, the John Wayneism and all of that, tough guy. And so being vulnerable allows other people to grieve with you and to touch into their own grief. I mean, what I tell my patients all the time is that a death of any kind is like an earthquake, and then there's a tsunami. And inside the tsunami is every loss you ever suffered that you didn't grieve because you had to pull it back together to go to school or to go to your wedding or to take care of your kids or whatever you were doing. You had to set yourself aside and carry on. And that grief eventually is going to bite you on the butt, one way or another. I mean, in the pandemic, 3 months after we went into sheltering, my horse PJ wrecked himself and had to be put down.
Oh, no.
And I'd never chosen death for my two dogs died at home naturally. They died, and I grieved them fully, but I had to choose PJ's death. And then 14 months later, my horse that I'd had for 25 years wrecked himself and had to be put down. And I thought the grief was going to kill me. But the outpouring of support and love when you share your grief with others brings like waves of healing back to you. So it's not just bodies and grief and sad and all the times you had to move as a kid or whatever you did. All of those count as losses, and they come back in and you share them. And I wouldn't say you're healed permanently, because the next dog, the next horse, the next friend, the tsunami is going to bring back some of the same losses. Yep. But we get better at it. We get better at it. I know now, after my horse Bodhi died, and I thought it would break me. The survival that you do after something like that then helps others. They see you and go, wow, she's still standing. Right?
She survived, I can survive.
Exactly.
Yep. The stories, I always say too, the stories are a fabric of our lives. I mean, we have good, bad stories. We have stories really of survival, cathartic moments. And these are the stories that happen to us. And in doing so, we learn and grow from them. And so they really are us. I mean, you may not like all your stories, but they really are who you are when it really comes down to it. Because if you didn't have some of these stories, you probably wouldn't be the person you've developed into today. And I think some people believe that there's people in this life that get a free pass, that they just soar through life and they're, it's a perfect ride, like movie stars or something. They're like, nothing bad ever happens to them. And when in reality, it seems like everybody seems to go through things that are challenging to themselves and that they're going to struggle with. And it's just one of those things. Now, you talk about 12-step programs, recovery programs on trauma. Do you think you could have done this without giving up drinking and drugs or other obsessions?
Not a chance.
Mm-hmm.
Think of it
Did
this
you have
way.
to do that? Were you having issues with that, or have you seen other people that you've worked with?
No, when I was 19, when I turned 20 in the hospital, and they put me back together again, I went straight into a bar, and I played music in bars, and I just kept running. I dropped out of school, and I moved to Hollywood from Washington, D.C., and I drank and drugged my way through my 20s. I always say people took a gap year, I took a gap decade.
Wow.
Just trying to outrun the trauma. And when it finally caught up with me, I hit a bottom. I hit a bottom where a voice inside me said, if you keep going tonight, you're going to die.
Mm-hmm.
And so I called a friend who was already sober, and I went to a meeting the next night, and I stood up and I said, my name's Valerie and I'm a speed freak, because I couldn't say alcoholic or addict, but I loved speed. Speed fixed the traumatic brain injury, Chris.
Oh, really?
It almost killed me, but it really made me feel very, very smart and very cohesive. And it served me until the day it didn't. Mm-hmm. And when I said that out loud, I sat back down in my chair with this little newcomer chip, and people's hands just came and held my head and my neck and my shoulders. I've never been hugged so much in my whole life as that night.
There you go. Well, that's, what is it, admitting is the first part of the of the whole experience. But no, it's interesting, like a lot of people do medicate with drugs, and they'll medicate, and like you said perfectly, it sometimes it works until it doesn't. And there's that you're always chasing that high with drugs and alcohol and everything else. And, it's never as fun as the first time. And you're always just trying to make it work, and, and you just, eventually you can never get to it. I did a thing where I drank pretty heavy for a good 20 years of my life. I mean, I didn't have a drinking problem per se with addiction, but I drank pretty heavy and abused myself. And, I was like, hey, I'm going to tie one on for the night before I go to bed, and I'll sleep better. And you don't sleep better. It's just dumb. It's just a con job you're telling yourself. And so, these are the things you go through, and you just realize that, hey, you need to change your life. So did things really start to improve for you at that point?
Yeah. I finished my bachelor's degree. I thought I was going to go get a MFA in poetry, but I didn't get into the only MFA program in driving distance at the time. There's 6 applicants a year. So I got on my knees and I said to the universe, like, what do you want from me? What would you have me do? And a voice as loud as like LAX calling the flights, he said, call the Jung Institute. And I'd read Carl Jung as a teenager, but you couldn't be a Jungian back then. You had to have an MD. And there was no way that this brain was going to go to medical school. So I called the Jung Institute and I said, so what do I need to be a Jungian therapist? And they said, go get a master's degree in clinical psych. So I was enrolled that fall. And going through the clinical psychology program at Antioch, LA was like a deep excavation into my own stuff so that I could then be with the stuff of other people. So I've been developing. When I would teach psychology, I would always say, like, here's the ego, and here's you living over here and all of your defenses. And it doesn't want you to go through pain. It goes, I don't want this. I want to go over here and have a drink. Go over here and eat a sleeve of Oreos. Go over here and sleep with someone else's husband. Go over here and go shopping, go scrolling, go anywhere but here. And when you go through the pain, and my pain had no words, it was just capital T, capital P, I'm hurting. But when I went through that pain enough times, there's a real self on the other side of it.
There you go. And that's how you find yourself, really, when it comes down to it.
Yes.
So anything more we need to talk about the book? We want to tease it out, of course, so that people will pick it up. Yeah. Anything more we need to tease out about the book we haven't covered?
just want to tell you a cool thing about the dream work.
Mm-hmm.
In the midst of my training as a dream tender, I had a dream of a red dress, and it was dancing in space. There was nobody inside it that you could see, but it clearly had a woman's body dancing and dancing and beautiful dancing. And this voice came through the dream that said, red dress medicine, red dress medicine, over and over again. Like, don't forget this, Johns. When you wake up, write it down. And I woke up, I wrote it down. Later that day, I painted the red dress to just kind of embody it. And a couple of weeks later, when we were in class, I shared that dream. And one of my cohorts said that she had written her master's thesis on a red dress project in Canada, where an artist in 2011, I believe, had hung empty red dresses from trees, each one for a missing or murdered Indigenous woman.
Oh, wow.
So it was like that came through the dream time, through the unconscious, the collective unconscious where we all are connected, all races, all genders, there's a collective place where we all meet. And when I shared that, one of my mentors said she went running for a drawing that she had made of a red dress dream.
Oh, wow.
Okay. And so I put it out there to other people. And there's another woman in the UK who did the red dress embroidery project, where she took a dress to, I think, 110 countries, where different women from different cultures embroidered on the same dress. And the dress is now on tour all over the world. It just was in South Africa. But there's this red dress energy. It's also the symbol for the American Heart Association. Mm-hmm. Everybody dresses in red to save hearts.
Yeah.
But that wasn't on my radar in this dream. It was just the metaphor for red dress medicine, the way the unconscious speaks, is red dress when you spell it differently is redress.
Redress.
Which means to repair. And that's what I'm doing, Chris. I'm repairing me. I'm repairing the people I've worked with. And now hopefully through writing this book, which is it's like really fucking vulnerable.
Yeah.
It's really, my husband, I don't think my husband's read it yet. Like, I don't know if he wants to really know me this well after 21 years, because it's like, it's all out there. It's all out there so that other people could say, me too. Or I feel like that too. Because that's how AA worked in the beginning. It was just two guys at a kitchen table in Akron, Ohio. And one was sober and one was drunk. And the drunk one said, me too. And they started this thing that has changed millions of people with millions of problems.
Oh, yeah.
And that's really what my book, I couldn't have written it without sponsors and mentors and a huge cohort of people that I have in my phone to reach out to and say, I'm not feeling good today. I never feel like drinking anymore, but I sure feel like eating cookies. And I can't eat cookies like a lady either. That's been off the,
Neither can I.
You know, I mean, everybody's got something to take the edge off. And my message is sit on the edge. Sit on the edge. Come to the edge. Old Irishman wrote a poem that said, the master said to the people, come down to the edge. And they said, we can't, we'll fall off. And he said, come down to the edge. And they said, no, we're scared. And he said, come down to the edge. And they came down to the edge and he pushed them and they flew.
Wow.
They flew, Chris, they flew. That's what happens when you come down to the edge.
There you go. That should be a t-shirt or make a great book title. Or what else? Coffee mug. That was the other thing I was thinking.
Yeah.
And I like the red dress. What was it called? Something red dress?
Red dress medicine.
Red dress medicine. That would make a great novel.
Yeah, that's next. That's my next book.
Oh, is it? Okay, there you go.
Yeah, on the fourth draft.
There you go. I like that. That's a great title.
Thank you.
I mean, it just evokes great images. You know, we've had a lot of novelists on the show with these cool titles that are just, you're just like, yeah, that's really cool. And that would be awesome. So give us your final pitch out to people to pick up the book, wherever fine books are sold, and in your .com.
Oh, yeah, of course. Geez, forgot that part. It's on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and every place that books are sold online. Pre-order till August 27 when it'll be in the mail to you. And the ebook is available now, I think, on every single ebook platform. It's available in India. I have a friend in Italy who just bought it, a friend in the UK, Canada. It's everywhere on ebooks, iBooks, Nooks and Kindles and all that good stuff. And I just have to show you the cover because I made the cover from two pictures, one of milk in a saucepan and the other one of cigarette ashes. And then an artist put it together to make it into like a real piece of art. Mine was just a wannabe piece of art.
There you go. Well, congratulations on your first book. This was always fun. When you get it published, I mean, you've got it published technically. But then when you cross the bridge and you start seeing the sales of the book go out and people start commenting on it, you know, it's a lot of fun. Yeah. So congratulations on that. We'll look forward to your future works as well. Thank you very much, Valerie, for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, Chris. It's been an honor. You're my first.
And it's an honor to have you as your first podcast interview as well.
Yeah, really.
On to many more. Please share your message. You know, I remember there was a point in my writing my book in 2021 where I reached the point where I was just writing 12, 18 hours a day. And then the editing became a nightmare. And that's it's part of the process. And I literally had reached the point where I was telling my friends that I've reached that moment of The Shining where I'm typing all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. Like I just feel like that's all I'm typing at this point, even though the words aren't quite there. And I'm ready just to throw it all out and just give up. And my friends that are authors, thank God I surrounded myself with them. They go, oh, if you're ready to give up, if you're ready to throw it all out, you're at the good part. And I'm like, what do you mean the good part? They're like, you're almost there. You're right there. You just hang in there. You're going to be fine. But one or two people took me aside and they said, there's somebody out there that needs to read your book. And you may never meet them. You may not know who it is, but they need your book really bad. And they need to read the words in your book to save them. And you have to write this book for that person. And I was like, wow. And that really motivated me. And they said, you may not even ever know them. And sometimes people come up to me and they'll be like, hey, you know, what you said, this changed my life. And I'm like, really? And some people, that's just what they needed. So go out and tell your story. Get out to all those other podcasts and share the message out there and cast your net far and wide. Thanks, Valerie, for being on the show. Thanks, Miles, for tuning in. Order the book wherever fine books are sold. You can get the pre-order now. Ashes in the Milk by Valerie Johns. It's out August 27th, 2024. And refer the show to your family, friends, and relatives. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss. Chris Voss, one of the TikTok and all those crazy places on the internet. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you next time. And that should have us out.